Hello, this is Graham Byrne, your NTEU Branch Vice President. In this video I describe the academic workload calculator and take you through an example that describes its use. When you first open the application, this is the screen you should see. The charts will be blank and the table will have mainly zeros. We haven't put any data into the fields yet, so there's nothing for it to calculate with. First thing I normally do is put my subject code into this field. This is optional. You don't have to put a code in here, but it's helpful for you to remember which subject you were talking about. So this is a subject I teach called Biz 1 BAN. It's a 15 credit point subject, so we can leave that number as it is, and there are 169 students enrolled. Now, the labels, if you mouse over the labels of all of these fields, you'll find a little description pops up. So for the enrolled students, you can find that number at this web address, the Student Records Office, SRO. You can type your subject code in there. It'll give you the number of enrolments in your particular version of the subject. So that might be helpful if you're not sure what the enrolments are going to be at, say, second semester when you're still at first semester. But normally you'll know what your enrolments are. For the lectures, the first category, new academic new subject, this is when you have less than 3 years experience in lectures and you have a new subject, or it's a completely new subject. Now the advertised rate here is 0.24 points per hour, which should give you 8 hours for every 1 classroom hour you teach. I might add, this category is rarely ever given to anybody. The next category is it's a new lecture, so you're new to an existing subject, or there's a major revision. And the published rate here is 0.15 points per hour. In other words, you get 5 hours for each 1 classroom hour. The standard lecture, which is the most common, you get 0.09 points per hour, or 3 hours for each classroom hour. And for repeat lectures, you get 0.03 points per hour, or 1 hour for 1. Now, unless you're giving the same lecture more than once a week, you wouldn't use this category, but that does happen quite a bit apparently. For tutorials, for first delivery tutorials, the rate is 0.06 points per hour, or per session hour. Now, the number that goes in this field, regardless of whether you've got multi-hour sessions or 1-hour sessions, is the number of hours per semester. And that's important, that the number of hours you actually spend in the classroom doing tutorial per semester is put in there. If you do have multi-hour sessions, say 2 or 3 hour sessions, then you can type that number in here. That will make a difference to the points per hour. So you get 0.06 points per session hour for a 1-hour session, but if you have multi-hour sessions, that points per hour will reduce. This is a way management has of reducing your allocation for 2, 3 and 4 hour sessions. We don't necessarily agree with that, but that's what actually happens. So just remember, the number that goes in the first delivery field is the number of hours per semester. If you do have multi-hour sessions, then type that number in here. 1 is the standard. If you have 2-hour sessions, put a 2 in there. For 3 or 4, put a 4 in there. Similarly for practicals and for workshops or clinics. The calculations are all the same regardless of the category. For repeat tutorials, labs or workshops, you get 0.03 points per hour. So again, you type the number of hours per semester into this field, and that will do the calculation for you. For assessment, feedback and consultation, there are 2 aspects of this, consultation and assessment and feedback. The number that goes into these fields is your percentage share. So if you do all of the consultation and all of the assessment and feedback, both of these fields will be 100. If you share your assessment and feedback with other academics, then you need to put the appropriate shares in. So if you do 50% of the consultation and 50% of the assessment and feedback, 50 and 50. If you do all of the consultation and say 50% of the feedback, then 150, and so on. For subject coordination, none is the default, but there are 3 categories here. There are more categories of subject coordination, and if you mouse over these labels, the sole teaching coordinator is where the subject's taught only on 1 campus, and with 1 person teaching on multiple campuses. So if you are involved in a subject that's taught on a single campus or multiple campuses, but you're the only person teaching that subject, the only coordinator and teacher, then you should get 40 hours plus 0.2 hours per student enrolled. Now, this is not happening. Most areas have actually reduced that 40 to 30, and in some cases below that. The 0.2 hours per student tends to stay the same. So before you even start, management are reducing their advertised or their published rates. So they publish a rate of 40 plus 0.2, then behind the scenes they alter those. So if you're not getting what this application predicts you should get, then perhaps you should ask your head of school or head of department, what's the actual formula being used to calculate my coordination allowance? For shared teaching coordinator, this is where a subject's taught by more than one person and more than one campus. So you may be the coordinator at the Bundoora campus and you'll have an instance coordinator at Bendigo or Riwodonga. This is the category you would use. In that case, you get 30 plus 0.2 hours per student. So 30 hours is the base rate plus 0.2 hours per student plus 10 hours per extra instance, so that you can liaise with the instance coordinator at the remote campus. And if you do have this category, then you should type the number of extra instances in here. So if you have teach it at Bundoora and there's one instance at Bendigo, then that number would be 1. If you're at Bundoora doing the main coordination and there's an instance at Bendigo and one at Shepparton, then that number would be 2. An instance coordinator is for those people who are instance coordinators. So just remember, you can mouse over all of the labels and that'll give you a more detailed description of what those numbers represent. Let's proceed with inputting the data. Now for this subject, I give 24 lectures per semester and they're just standard lectures. I also give 12 first delivery tutorials. So one tutorial is my first delivery and then I have some repeat tutorials per week. I'll start off by saying I give 12 repeat tutorials. That is, I give a first delivery and a second tutorial, which is a repeat. I have 100% share of the student consultation and a 60% share of the assessment, and my other people do the rest of the assessment. I'm an instance coordinator and my share of coordination is 100%. Now when you finish, make sure you click outside the field and that'll make sure everything updates. So click somewhere in the grey area and then your table will update and the graphs themselves will update. So let's go through the table and explain what the numbers mean. So in lectures, I give 24 lectures, so this is the number of lectures. This is a bit of a check. The rate is 0.09 points per hour, so that gives me a total of 2.16 points or 72 hours. So that's 3 times 24, so 3 hours per hour for my 24 lectures. The effective AFC, 0.243 points per hour, which gives me a total of 5.83 points or 194.3 hours to mark and assess 169 students' work, which is fair enough. For tutorials, I've got 24 tutorials and the rate is 0.045. Now that means I got 0.06 for the first delivery and 0.03 for the next 12, averages out at 0.045 per hour or 1.08 points for a total of 36 hours. That's 24 hours for the 12 first delivery tutorials and a further 12 hours for the remaining 12 repeats. And for subject coordination, that's calculated at 0.03 points per hour, so I get 1.31 points or 43.8 hours for a total of 10.38 points or 346.2 hours. If I look at the spike chart, the very first spike is the point allocation I would get before I've been allocated any tutorials. So that number there includes my lecture and my assessment and feedback and consultation allocations and also my coordination allowance. I take the first tutorial, so this is my first run tutorial, my second first run and so forth up to my 12th first run tutorial, and then I start to only get 1 hour per hour or 0.03 extra points up to 24 tutorials, and that's my final allocation, 10.38 points or around about 350 hours, a bit under 346.2 hours. So the spike chart gives you the information in a little bit more detail what you get as you build up the number of tutorials that you take. The region chart down here, this is this boundary defines where the cap will kick in. So if I was doing more than 85% of the assessment, feedback and consultation in this subject, then I wouldn't get any credit for it. So once I hit the cap, that's it. The most I can get for AFC in this subject is a bit under 85%, maybe about 84%. The fact that I'm doing just a bit over 65% means that I haven't been affected by the caps. So that's as it should be. There's nothing really wrong with it. However, in fact, in this subject, I don't just take 2 tutorials. I take my 12 first delivery tutorials. I in fact take 24 repeats. I take 2 repeats per week for 12 weeks. I click outside. Now watch what happens to the charts, the table, and so forth. Things change dramatically. This is the switcheroo bug in the system. We think it's a bug from the union's perspective. Management think it's a feature. So as soon as the number of tutorials exceeds the number of lectures, so if we've got 24 lectures and now 36 tutorials, the AFC ceases to be bundled with lectures where the cap is 0.4 points per hour. It's now bundled with tutorials and the cap here is 0.1 points per hour. So these two numbers add up to 0.1, which means I've reached the cap. In fact, I've exceeded the cap, and that's what this red indicates. So now I'm only getting 2.16 points for my assessment, feedback and consultation, which is 72 hours. And that's 72 hours to mark over 100 odd students' work, because I'm doing about 60% of the assessment here. And my subject coordination doesn't change. Now the spike chart illustrates this dramatically. This is the situation before when I took 24 tutorials. So remember, I got almost 10 points or 348 hours. But as soon as I take that extra tutorial, go from 24 to 25, my allowance drops. And then as I take more tutorials, I come back up to here, 7.07 points. So this is the amount that I've lost. I've lost, by taking an extra 12 hours, I've actually lost almost 3 points, or something like 3.6 points. And now I've only got 235.8 hours. The chart at the bottom also illustrates this. As soon as your tutorial number or tutorial hours exceed your lecture hours, the cap actually moves down, because now a different cap applies, the 0.1 cap. So the maximum I can be allocated for AFC is now around about 25%. In fact, I've exceeded the cap by 41.4% according to this text here. That means I've been denied 3.7 points compared to if the caps did not exist, or about 122.3 hours. So this is a large impost on myself by doing extra work. In other words, taking an extra 12 tutorials, my allocation has been reduced by over 122 hours. And this is what has been happening to many, many people. We've looked at a couple of areas, and it's not uncommon for people to lose 3 or 4 points just because of the capping, and it's extremely unfair. So my advice to all academics is to have a look at your subjects. If you think you might be affected by the caps, if you get this sort of picture, then let us know and we can take this to management and try and deal with it for you. That's all for this video.